Now, I want to get onto this issue of Captain Cook. It is 250 years ago this year, this April in fact, since he first set European eyes upon the continent of Australia. But the Greens don't think we should commemorate that.
The Prime Minister declares it an historic moment for our country, the day Captain Cook set foot on Australian soil. But just weeks out from the 250th anniversary, some events have been cancelled and the Greens argue the celebrations should be scrapped altogether.
I don't think that this is an appropriate way to mark our history because it's not being honest about the dark sides of Australia's history. And until we're honest about that and start telling the truth and start having a treaties with our First Nations people, then events like these are going to take us further away from the path of healing.
That's Adam Bandt. Let's go to New South Wales Greens MP David Shoebridge. See if we can find a point of agreement here, David. Thanks for joining us again.
Good day, Chris.
Now, you, of course, accept that Captain Cook sailed off these shores of the east coast of Australia in 1770, 250 years ago, and that was the first time Europeans sort of found the continent, discovered the continent. And that was a very historical...
that's not right. That's not right, Chris. You know that Dampier and others found the continent, mapped large parts of Western Australia.
Yeah, they didn't quite know what they'd found, but I think it's...
same continent.
Yeah, same continent. But I think it's accepted that Captain Cook played this part in history, documented it, mapped it, took all sorts of scientific bearings and took it back to Europe. So I'm just wondering whether you accept that it was a significant historical event.
Well, I accept it was significant, clearly significant. It was significant in terms of it was the first time that there was a sort of armed forced landing in Australia, which was opposed by First Nations peoples, and that's what happened on the 29th of April in what we now call Botany Bay. It was significant in terms of it saw a big imperial venture start, which ended up with the invasion of Australia, which started, the full-on invasion of Australia, which started in 1788. It was clearly significant.
Do you think it was a good thing? Do you think it was a positive thing in the history of the world, given that it was the first step in what led to the settlement of this continent and the establishment of the political entity of Australia?
Well, I think for First Nations peoples, it was a disastrous moment. It was a moment that they resisted from the outside, and that history is kind of fascinating.
What about all of us now? Let's talk about all of us who are here in Australia now. Do you think that moment was a positive development in world history?
Well, I think it was part of a broad colonial venture, which on the whole was not positive for world history.
So the establishment of Australia was not positive?
Well, that entire expansion, that colonialist invasion expansion, saw Indigenous peoples, First Nations peoples decimated around the globe.
So the settlement and establishment of Australia, which became a country, and it had laws and political entities, one of which you sit in. You sit in the New South Wales Parliament, and you actually are a lawmaker in that Parliament. Yet you don't think the establishment of all of that was a positive thing for the world or for Australia?
I can celebrate the positive things about Australia, and I do. I celebrate the fact we live in a democracy. I celebrate the fact that I feel physically secure, and I feel like most of my political rights are able to be exercised. I celebrate our dysfunctional kind of democracy, but I don't celebrate, and I won't celebrate, the cost that has been paid by First Nations people.
But you won't celebrate the incredible...
And I won't take part in a celebration of the first moment of dispossession. You can celebrate the good things about Australia without denying the reality of our history.
But you won't celebrate the incredible spirit of adventurism and scientific endeavour and human knowledge-seeking that is represented by Captain Cook's voyage and discoveries?
Well, you can acknowledge those human achievements, and I think anybody would. I mean, they were quite extraordinary human achievements by a man who was in large part, horribly undervalued by the British Navy afterwards.
David,
you can celebrate those achievements.
David,
celebrate those achievements.
I'm just terribly confused because you don't want to celebrate Australia Day, which marks the actual settlement of Australia by the First Fleet in 1788, because that was the start of invasion, you say. But now you don't want to commemorate Captain Cook finding the joint 18 years earlier, because that
he didn't find the joint.
From the point of view of Britain, he did, and you don't want, and you say that's the moment of invasion. I mean, how many moments of invasion? How many days of the calendar are we entitled to celebrate this country?
Well, you know what happened, don't you, on the 29th of April in 1770? Do you know actually what happened on the day?
I've read about it.
A boat sailed into Botany Bay. A long ship sort of left from that with armed marines on it. It approached the shore, and two Aboriginal warriors, an older and a younger man, stood there and resisted. Went and brought shields and resisted the invasion, and then they were shot at. They were shot at by the Marines on board the longboat, shot at. They then ran, having been shot, they then ran away, and the village that was there, the settlement was there, they ran away from the invasion on that day. That's what happened on the day.
Indeed.
It was the first time that we saw British Marines shoot at Aboriginal Australians.
David?
And to commemorate that, I think, and ignore that fact of history is pretty brutal, Chris.
Well, I think that you've just... I'm glad you know your history. It's just that you refuse to commemorate it. I appreciate
you can commemorate it, but you've got to acknowledge the reality of what happened. It was the first time we saw Marines shoot at First Nations peoples.
Facts and reality are two very good things. We should always acknowledge them. Thanks so much for joining us, David.
On that.
Yeah,
cheers,
thanks
Chris.
for David Shoebridge there. We all know about the complexities of this and the difficulties and what went on, but my God, what a momentous occasion, the fact that Captain Cook from England, yes, we'd had the Dutch on the other side of the continent, but it's from those endeavours, to use the word of Captain Cook, that this country and all that it represents eventuated. And I, for one, think that is, on the whole, a bloody good thing.